How do I go from like playing on one drum to playing on multiple? So let's say you're doing like a roll exercise. Isolate out outside sweeps, so from the inside to the out, also known as like down the drums, with just the right hand. So you're just isolating out one motion, one direction with just one hand. After you get that down, now try it with moving to the inside or up the drums when you're doing this. So moving toward it this way. Okay, once you get this down for the right hand, and you can do both inside, outside sweeps or down and up the drums. Okay, now let's work on the left hand. Outside, and then after a while, inside. Then you can work on doing them both at the same time. Now try it with different types of drums. So instead of doing it with these two drums, try it just on here. So for example, or like this, like there's many different variations that you can do. So start with isolating out one hand moving at a time, then the other hand moving at a time in one direction, then try it a different direction, and then try doing both directions. A really fun thing that you can do, tell your tenor line, hey, now I want you to play the exact same rhythm, but improvise your split. That forces the tenor line to focus on the rhythm and have it not be affected by how they move their hands. So that was something that I do with the tenor lines that I used to work with, and that really helped them out with internalizing what the underlying pattern is rather than just focusing on the split. Another thing that you can do to like help yourself to like memorize the different splits is figure out, well, what is the pattern? Like when I'm moving around the drums, am I doing going down, so 1, 2, 3, 4, or from high to low? Or you can think of it as like, well, what is the physical pattern for this? So am I doing like a Z stroke? So I'm going Zorro, going across like that. So think of like the different ways that you can memorize the different kinds of splits that you're doing. You want to have it so that you are playing the same technique as if you're playing on one drum, and you just happen to be moving the arm over rather than like turning the wrist over to get the scrapes and the sweeps. There's two issues that you could have with doing diddles in particular while doing sweeps is you're either going to hit the rim on the first note or on the second note. Depending on which one you get, it's going to give you some different information on what it is that you should work on. So if it's the first note, you just need to move your playing zones closer towards the center of the drum that you're playing on for the first note. It doesn't mean move it into the center, it just means move it away from the rim just a little bit. If it's the second note, then you're not moving fast enough to get from one note to the next. So if you're hearing that second note, you need to just move more. So practice not just up and down, but also practice those quick motions from one drum to the next. Since you're on YouTube, I'll show you on here. But if you go to the home tab, underneath the technique exercises, this exercise called rebound. You could play this for tenors, and you can work on it with sweeps, scrapes, inside drums to outside drums, so that you're playing 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then after and then eighth notes, etc. You can also do it as crossovers. So the way that I'd have my drum line work on this is we do it on one drum as tenor players, and then we would do this with crossovers. And the goal, kind of like playing mallets, Stevens grip, 4-mallet technique, is when you're going from one chord to the next chord, is you want to move as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible from one note to right above the next note you're going to play, so you can go straight down, as opposed to going at a slicing angle, because then you're just kind of like guessing. You're like, I think I'm going to get this. So when you're doing these crossovers, go as quickly as possible to the next drum when doing any kind of sweep with this particular exercise, and that's going to help you out with it. A great way to work on it is isolated diddles. You're just playing right, both, left. I'm cutting in half the timing. So when you're doing this, you can work on it as a sweep or as a scrape, whether you're going outside or down the drums or inside or up the drums, however you want to call it. But another thing, let's go back down to technique, is you can work on like 16th note roll variations, like let's say rodeo. So you can play this one with like, I'm only going to do right hand sweeps. So play just right hand sweep or just left hand sweep. And then, okay, now I'm going to do just right hand inside and now just left hand inside. Okay, now we're going to combine them. So we're going to do both. And now, woo, that's fun. Now we're going to do the inside version of that, etc. But another thing you can work on to work on your scrapes or sweeps, again, this is under the technique exercises, are double beat variations. So if you want to work on 2 drum sweeps, do diddle strength exercise. If you want to work on 3 drum sweeps, do the 3-stroke strength. But here's the exercise in the nutshell. So you're doing about a 3-inch difference between your accents and taps on this one, which is weird, I know. But you play through, and then you play an accent on the first note, and then you play an accent on the second note, Again, only about a 3-inch difference between the accents and the taps, and you can play that as scrapes. So you're playing like the first partial on drum 1, the second partial on drum 3. And so you work on this specifically focusing on, okay, now I'm going to emphasize the second partial, or I'm going to emphasize the first partial. And so it forces your brain to think about like the placement of the first note on your drum, and then the second note, like making sure that you're efficient with it and like not hitting the rim, etc. If you go all the way down to the tips section, which is way at the bottom of this particular playlist has several hours of drumming tips, and there's quite a few that are specific to tenors. 5 ways to work up your tenor sweeps or scrapes with 1 exercise. So check out the start of this particular video. So that first one will talk about the title. The next part of this talks about, okay, what do you do for flam accent crossovers? And then it gives you some tips on flam accents without playing a flam, tips for moving around the drums. There's a lot of different tips in here, a collection of them. So that's another way to get several hours of advice on like how to improve your drumming. And you can find that again under the drumming playlist right here. It's this particular one. Also, you can see how I work on it. So if you go here under the drum chops, technique, and limb independence live streams, these are all of the live streams that I've done. You can find the ones that has like a tenor on the image on here, and it'll like show you like what I'm working on, like Beatlicious, or like how I practice quad logic. Like there's prior live streams that specifically show like how I'm working on stuff. A tip for tuning your drum line, one of the things that I would do is I had like YouTube videos saved of sectionals playing through something very basic that allowed me to hear each one of the drums, like if we're thinking of tenors in particular, like Vanguard, old school like basic strokes. That allows you to hear every single one of the drums. Then you can just listen to that and tune to that so you can sound exactly like the drum line that you want to go for. So when you're tuning drums with Mylar heads and whatnot, you want to tune, go across. And then I had an instructor who said, then you go over 1 and you go across. Then you go over 1 and you go across, over, across. That's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is like a star approach, where you just keep going like this until you go through all the different lugs, etc. Another approach that you can take is to skip like every 2. So you go 1, skip, and you go here. And then you skip, and then here. So you slowly work your way around. The point is you don't want to tune like this because it's going to slowly tighten this and slowly loosen this up, unless you're doing Kevlar snares. So if you have a Kevlar head, like if you look at Yamaha, they actually recommend in their like how to tune a marching snare head, they actually recommend going clockwise around the snare drum. So this was something that I actually learned from Ralph Hardiman. So he was talking about how what you want to do is like put a little bit of weight, finger tighten all the different lugs, and then once you're done with that, specifically with Kevlar only, you tune in a circle around this. So our snare line, back when I was marching, we always tuned in a circle, whereas the tenor line and the bass line would tune in like a star pattern, etc., just kind of like going through each one of the lugs. However, to argue with myself, I have seen some like top tier snare lines who will use like the star or cross, crisscross approach, etc. But I've been told, because of the threading of the Kevlar itself, like the way that it's like kind of woven over each other, it's not good for the head and they won't last as long, apparently.